Cassius Clay, known as Muhammad Ali. Malcolm Little, known as Malcolm X. Lou Alcindor, known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Mike Tyson. Dave Chappelle. What do all of these highly respected, influential black men have in common? They're all Muslim, and they're all very outspoken about their Islamic faith. Take Muhammad Ali, for example. According to Ali, his conversion began after he saw a cartoon depicting a white slave owner brutally beating one of his black slaves and insisting that slave pray to Jesus. In his own words, the message of the cartoon said that Christianity was the religion of the oppressive white establishment. Mike Tyson, another one of society's heavyweights, converted to Islam while he was in prison. According to his testimony, he was moved after reading books on Islam and decided to convert since he saw Islam as a religion of peace. These men, who helped shape and continue to influence entire generations of African American people, saw the religion of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad as revolutionary for social equality and civil rights. But it makes me wonder, what would the Prophet Muhammad have thought of them?
Why don't you like to be called Clay anymore?
No, Clay was not my name. Once we follow, believe, understand the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and come into knowledge of ourselves, then we want to be called after names of our people, which are names that fit us black people. And Clay was a white man's name. It was a slave name. And I'm no longer Clay. I'm no longer a slave. So now I'm Muhammad Ali.
In this clip, Ali says that he no longer wants to be called Cassius Clay because Clay is a white man's name. Instead, he prefers to go by the name of Muhammad Ali because, according to him, that is the name of his people. Unfortunately, for the likes of Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson, they have been misinformed, and here's why. When we think of the Prophet Muhammad, it's easy to assume that he was more of a dark-skinned man, being of Arabian descent himself. But take a look at the way in which even his closest companions described him. Sahih Muslim 43. Al-Jurayri reported, I said to Abu at-Tufail, did you see Allah's messenger? He said, yes, he had a white, handsome face. Sahih Bukhari 63. While we were sitting with the Prophet in the mosque, a man came riding on a camel. He made his camel kneel down in the mosque, tied its foreleg, and then said, whom amongst you is Muhammad? We replied, this white man reclining on his arm. The hadiths continue to tell us over and over about how white Muhammad's cheeks were, and how white his legs were, and how white his arms were, and how white his abdomen was. You see this man right here? His name is Muhammad al-Yaqubbi. Why is he important? He is the 34th grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so the Prophet Muhammad was white, really white. What's the big deal? He was still an advocate for human equality, especially black people, right? Allah's messenger said, you should listen to and obey your ruler, even if he was an Ethiopian black slave whose head looks like a raisin. The Prophet said, listen and obey your chief, even if an Ethiopian whose head is like a raisin were made your chief. Whoever wants to see Satan should look at Naphtali. He was a black man with long flowing hair, inflamed eyes, and dark ruddy cheeks. Referring to Ethiopians as raisin heads and describing the appearance of Satan as a black man. I wonder what else Muhammad did to champion human rights. Sahih Bukhari 7263. I went to the house of the Prophet, and behold, Allah's messenger was staying in a mashroba, an attic room, and a black slave of Allah's messenger was at the top of the stairs. Sahih al-Bukhari 6161. Allah's messenger was on a journey and he had a black slave called Anjasha, and he was driving the camels. Apparently, the Prophet Muhammad didn't care much about black liberation or equal rights, considering the fact that he himself was the owner of multiple black slaves. But that's not where this lesson ends. Pay close attention to this next story. Sunan an-Nasai 46:21. A slave came and gave his pledge to the Messenger of Allah to emigrate, and the Prophet of Allah did not realize he was a slave. Then his master came looking for him. The Prophet said, "Sell him to me." So he bought him for 2 black slaves. Then he did not accept the pledge of anyone after that until he asked, "Is he a slave?" This passage explains to us that an Arab slave came to Muhammad and made a pledge to join him. Muhammad accepted this man's pledge, but he wasn't aware of the fact that he was a slave. When the slave's owner came looking for him, Muhammad made a deal with the owner to buy this Arab slave for the price of 2 black slaves. Not only were black slaves only half as valuable to Muhammad as Arab slaves, but this passage is also listed under the title, Selling Animals for Animals. The Prophet Muhammad also had a son-in-law named Ali. That's where Cassius Clay got his name from, the Prophet Muhammad and his son-in-law Ali. Do you suppose the Prophet Muhammad treated his black slaves as one of his own people, like he would treat his son-in-law? Let's find out. We were with the Messenger of Allah in the year of Khaybar, and we did not get any spoils of war except for wealth, goods, and clothes. Then a man from Banu ad-Dubayb, who was called Rifa'a bin Zaid, gave the Messenger of Allah a black slave who was called Middam. The Messenger of Allah set out for Wadi al-Qurra. When we were in Wadi al-Qurra, while Middam was unloading the luggage of the Messenger of Allah, an arrow came and killed him. The people said, "Congratulations, you will go to paradise." But the Messenger of Allah said, "No, by the one in whose hand is my soul. The cloak that he took from the spoils of war on the day of Khaybar is burning him with fire." Muhammad and his men had just finished raiding the city of Khaybar. As it happened, one of his black slaves named Middam took a cloak from the spoils. Later, Middam was unloading Muhammad's luggage and he was shot by an arrow. As he was dying, people were comforting him, telling him that he would go to paradise. But Muhammad insisted that Middam was burning in agony because of that cloak that he took from the spoils. Now, let's compare that story to this one. The Prophet sent Ali to Khalid to bring the hummus, the spoils of war, and I hated Ali. And Ali had taken a bath after a sexual act with a slave girl from the hummus. I said to Khalid, "Don't you see this?" i.e. what Ali was doing. When we reached the Prophet, I mentioned that to him. He said, "Oh Buraira, do you hate Ali?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you hate him? For he deserves more than that from the hummus." So if you're one of Muhammad's black slaves and you take so much as a cloak from the spoils of war without permission, you were surely going to go to hell. But of course, if you're Muhammad's son-in-law and take a captive black slave girl and rape her, then that's just fine. In fact, you deserved even more. Oh, and by the way, Muhammad trading female sex slaves was also a very common occurrence. Al-Tabari, Volume 8. From his share of captive women, the Prophet gave, after using them, his son-in-law, Ali, a slave girl, Raytah bint Hilal, to enjoy her at his will. It says a lot about what Muhammad thought of the black community. However, Nothing tells us more about what Muhammad truly thought of black people than this. Mishkat al-Masabih 119. Allah's Messenger said, Allah created Adam when he had to create him, and he struck his right shoulder, and there emitted from it white offspring as if they were white ants. He struck his left shoulder, and there emitted from it the black offspring as if they were charcoal. He then said to those who had been emitted from the right shoulder, for paradise, and I do not mind. Then he said to those who had been emitted from his left shoulder, they are for hell, and I do not mind. Muslim scholars will argue that this passage is actually about predestination, and the colors are meant to describe people's souls, not their skin. The white offspring represent white or pure souls who are predestined by Allah to heaven. On the other hand, the black offspring represent the darkened or evil souls predestined for hell. But that argument doesn't work, and here's why. The Arabic word that is used for offspring in this passage is thariyatun, which can mean several things, including descendants, lineage, and race. The word soul, however, is not one of those definitions. Muhammad meant exactly what he said in this passage. There are children of Adam whose race is white, and there are children of Adam whose race is black. The ones who are white are destined for paradise. As for the children of Adam who are black, they are destined for hell. Would Cassius Clay, Mike Tyson, and these other prestigious black men have been better off as Christians? Doesn't the Bible mention slavery more than the Quran does? Doesn't the Bible justify slavery according to the writings of Paul in the New Testament? Find out soon in part 2, where we will discuss the topic of slavery in the Bible. Until then, salam.